On a warm spring night in Milwaukee, two police officers encountered a naked, bleeding 14-year-old boy stumbling down the street. The boy, Konerak Sinthasomphone, was incoherent, clearly traumatized, and unable to speak English well. 3 black women had already called 911, begging for help. The officers went to apartment 213. A calm, polite white man answered the door. Jeffrey Dahmer told them the boy was his 19-year-old boyfriend, that they'd simply had a lover's quarrel. The officers laughed it off. Despite the boy's age, despite the blood, despite the smell, that smell, they escorted Konerak back into Dahmer's apartment. Within hours, Konerak was dead. But here's the question we need to ask. How did Jeffrey Dahmer kill 17 people over 13 years in a major American city? Was it just one monster? Or was it all of us? Jeffrey Dahmer didn't choose his victims randomly. Of his 17 confirmed victims, 11 were black, 2 were Asian, 1 was Native American. Most were young men between 14 and 33. Many were gay or bisexual. Some were sex workers. Several lived on society's margins, economically disadvantaged, estranged from family, or struggling with their identity in a deeply homophobic era. Dahmer hunted in Milwaukee's most vulnerable communities. He frequented gay bars, bus stations, shopping malls, places where young men of color who were questioning their sexuality might feel isolated, invisible. He offered money, alcohol, the promise of connection. And when they disappeared, hardly anyone noticed. Their families filed missing persons reports. They called police stations. They searched the streets. But their pleas were met with indifference. Officers suggested these young men had run away or were living the lifestyle. Coded language that meant police didn't consider them worth finding. This is what criminologists call missing white woman syndrome. The media and law enforcement phenomenon where disappearances of white women receive massive attention while missing people of color, especially men, are ignored. When a white woman goes missing, it's breaking news. When a black or brown man disappears from a low-income neighborhood, it's Tuesday. Between 1978 and 1991, families reported their sons missing. They described the last person seen with them, often a white man in his 20s or 30s. Some even gave police Dahmer's address. But the pattern was never investigated. Why? Because the victims were deemed disposable by a system steeped in racism and homophobia. These weren't statistics. They were sons, brothers, friends. They had dreams, families, futures. But to the system designed to protect them, they were invisible. So let's talk about May 27, 1991. The night that should have ended Jeffrey Dahmer's killing spree, but instead sealed Konerak Sinthasomphone's fate. Konerak escaped Dahmer's apartment while Dahmer was out buying beer. The boy was naked, bleeding from his rectum, and had been drugged. 3 women, Sandra Smith, Tina Spivey, and Nicole Childress, found him and immediately called 911. When officers John Balcerzak, Joseph Gabrish, and Richard Perubkin arrived, those women told them something was seriously wrong. But Dahmer appeared, calm, articulate, white, and told a different story. He said Konerak was his adult boyfriend, that this was just a domestic dispute. The officers never checked Konerak's ID. They never called for a translator, even though the boy spoke limited English. They never called Child Protective Services. They didn't even run Dahmer's name through their database, which would have revealed he was a registered sex offender, convicted just 1 year earlier for sexually assaulting Konerak's older brother. Instead, they escorted Konerak back to apartment 213. One officer later radioed that they'd returned the intoxicated Asian, naked male to his boyfriend, and joked about needing to be deloused. The audio tape captured them laughing. Inside that apartment were photographs of dismembered bodies, a refrigerator containing human heads, and a 57-gallon barrel filled with acid and decomposing torsos. The smell was overwhelming. Neighbors had been complaining for months, but the officers never looked. They took Dahmer at his word and left. Konerak Sinthasomphone was murdered that night. He was Dahmer's 13th victim, but the warning signs went far beyond that one night. Neighbors in the Oxford apartments had been calling police for over a year. Pamela Bass reported terrible smells, like rotting meat. Others heard power saws running at 3 a.m. One neighbor saw Dahmer dragging what looked like a body. Every time, police responded minimally or not at all. Why? Because this was a low-income building in a predominantly black neighborhood. Because the complaints came from people the system had taught officers not to take seriously. And Dahmer's criminal history? It was a roadmap of escalation that was completely ignored. In 1986, he was arrested for public masturbation in front of two 12-year-old boys. A clear red flag for sexual deviance. In 1988, he was arrested for drugging and sexually assaulting 13-year-old Sinthasomphone, Konerak's brother. He served just 10 months of a one-year sentence and was released on probation. During his probation, Dahmer killed 4 more people. His probation officer noted he was doing well and maintaining employment. No one checked his apartment. No one noticed the pattern. And what about before the killing started? Dahmer's childhood was a catalog of missed interventions. His parents' bitter divorce left him emotionally abandoned. He was drinking alcohol daily by age 14. He was dissecting roadkill animals in his backyard, bleaching bones, storing them in jars. His father found a bag of bones in the crawl space and asked about them. Jeffrey said they were from animals. His father believed him. Teachers noticed his drinking. Classmates knew something was wrong. They even created a Dahmer fan club as a dark joke, because his behavior was so bizarre. But no school counselor intervened. No mental health professional was called. The system that should have caught a troubled child before he became a killer simply looked away. Every institution failed. The police, the courts, the schools, the probation system, they all had chances to stop Jeffrey Dahmer. They all chose indifference. When Jeffrey Dahmer was finally arrested in July 1991, the families of his victims learned a devastating truth. Their sons could have been saved. If the officers had done their jobs that May night, Konerak would be alive. So would Anthony Hughes, the deaf man Dahmer killed 3 days after Konerak. So would Errol Lindsay, Curtis Straughter, and Jeremiah Weinberger. Konerak's family filed a lawsuit against the Milwaukee Police Department. They settled for $850,000, a number that could never represent the value of their son's life, or the agony of knowing he was given back to his killer by the people sworn to protect him. The Milwaukee community, particularly communities of color and LGBTQ+ residents, erupted in outrage. They'd been saying for years that police didn't care about them, that their lives didn't matter to the system. Dahmer's case proved them right in the most horrific way imaginable. Officers Balcerzak and Gabrish were fired, and then reinstated with back pay after their union appealed. Balcerzak later became president of the Milwaukee Police Association. The message was clear. Even in the face of unconscionable failure, the system protects its own. This wasn't just about one serial killer. Jeffrey Dahmer operated openly because systemic racism, homophobia, and classism created a permission structure for violence against marginalized people. His victims weren't invisible because they were secretive. They were invisible because society chose not to see them. That's the price of indifference. That's the cost when we decide some lives matter less than others. Jeffrey Dahmer didn't get away with murder for 13 years because he was particularly clever. He got away with it because the systems designed to protect us failed spectacularly, repeatedly, and along lines of race, class, and sexuality that we still struggle with today. So remember Konerak Sinthasomphone. Remember Tony Hughes, Errol Lindsay, Anthony Sears, and all the others whose names deserve to be spoken. Remember that their deaths weren't inevitable. They were the direct result of institutional indifference and prejudice. Which brings me to you. In the 30+ years since Dahmer's arrest, have things really changed? Are marginalized communities safer? Do police respond differently to missing persons cases involving people of color and LGBTQ+ individuals? I want to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below. Do you think law enforcement has learned from this case? Or are we still seeing the same systemic failures? What needs to change? If this video opened your eyes to how institutional failure enables violence, hit that subscribe button. We need to keep telling these stories, keep asking these hard questions, and keep demanding better. Their names, their stories, never forgotten,